discipline is a powerful skill, and eventually, inevitably, you will find a situation in life where that skill just doesn't apply. We all human, and we all kind of try to go from our own experience, and our own experience is a very thin slice of life. People that control it, they're humans, and then they end up using those things for their own gain, and they print money and whatever. We're already rapidly approaching the situation when modern AI systems are as good at intellectual reasoning, as capable as their majority of human population. If we're not there, we will be there very soon.
Welcome to the Sinclair podcast, where we share real-world experiences, wisdom, and the honest struggles of entrepreneurs to help you navigate and scale your business with confidence. Dima, I will say my longtime friend, we met through Form Group, so Entrepreneurs Organization. I think it was 2012 was our first meeting, maybe 2013.
Something like that, yeah.
What a journey it's been, my friend. It's been an absolute pleasure to call you a friend and just to get to know you. I mean, what started out as these structured monthly meetings, diving into our businesses really at the time, that then just evolved over the years to working on ourselves and growing ourselves as fathers and partners and in business and all encompassing.
Yeah, at the end of the day, business is a reflection of a human being, right? Of all the human beings in the business, starting with the founders, and then it goes from there, right? Like inevitably, that's the imprint we make on the business, and the struggles of the business are our struggles, and vice versa.
Yeah, for sure. Dima, in addition to helping me, and we'll talk about that a little later on, but I mean, you've worked with a lot of different entrepreneurs over the years in lots of different sectors, in SaaS and tech, which is a background of yours, in crypto and blockchain, in psychedelics and AI.
Technology, really, is my thing. Yeah.
What are some of the consistent themes that you see entrepreneurs having challenges with?
I know if on my t-shirt, this mental health, my friend came up with this play on the word mental health, right? Because the word health is spelled differently, right? And I think that that's really the biggest challenge for every human. Entrepreneurship is a very exciting and very challenging area of being a human, because you're building something, you're growing something, and it's on you. And your own ability to interact with your emotions, if you will. I don't like those words, but that's kind of one way to talk about this. So your mental health is a foundation for what you achieve with your business, right? And I think that this is going to become more and more important for humans moving forward, because the world is speeding up, and we humans are not being able to catch up with that, because our biological hardware has evolved a long time ago, and it's not being able to catch up with all the stuff that's happening. So for me, that's kind of where it all starts, with our psychology, with our mental health, with our emotions.
Do you see any certain patterns that are similar with entrepreneurs when they come to you for guidance, or in general over the years of what some of those blockers are? Or we've used the term blind spots, which I really like.
Well, each human is absolutely unique on the one hand, right? On the other hand, we're all humans, and we have similar patterns, right? So it's just like each human has a unique set of similar patterns. That's one way to think about it, right? And for different people, it's different, right? Like, we all have different fears, for example, right? Like I am a tech guy, and I've built a bunch of tech businesses. And for me, originally, the biggest challenge was about talking to humans, because humans are scary, right? So sales and marketing and understanding humans, because I wanted the world to be different. I want to build my software, and then it's good, and then you guys should buy it because it's good, but that's not how it works, right?
Made sense to you, but
Yeah. So I had my fears, my struggles, with that, and had to deal with that. And then other people might be awesome at talking to humans, but then they're like, oh, I'm not technical, I cannot understand this. They have a different type of fear. So end of the day, it is about you, a particular human with your unique set of fears, and stories about I'm this way, I'm an introvert, I'm extrovert, blah, 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 right? But you're way more than that. It's like, and then you seeing what are your struggles, what are your fears, and somehow hopefully finding a way toward them, right? Because otherwise they put us into a box. So yeah, that's kind of one thought. And one other thing I'll mention, and again, like there are many ways to, many successful businesses, again, they're built in many different ways, right? And some people are really awesome at going all out and being extreme and how they like, doing all-nighters. I'm not that way. For me, a way to build a successful business, it's about sustainable daily patterns. And, like if you can keep doing what you're doing long enough, you will achieve a lot of success, just because many other people just give up. And again, it's very human, right? Because there's this flow of events and emotions, and inevitably we will face all kinds of crises, in our personal lives, with our relationships, with our parents, or with our kids, with our health, with money, with the world and everything, right? And many people at some point will just fall apart in one of those situations, right? But if you're able to sustain moving forward for a long time, then you will be able to build a successful business. That's kind of how I see that.
Yeah, it's a great perspective, Dima. I was thinking as you were sharing that, when I go back to the early years when we first started to get to know each other, I mean, you were, I want to say, like a little bit more analytical. It was, I remember, if a topic was brought up you wanted to learn about, you would go and read 10 books on it literally, and you would know all the facts and all that stuff. But then there's a transformation in you, and you seem to let that period go. And I guess the question would be, how did your self-discovery journey go from being, maybe introverted analytical to where you are now?
There's this very smart guy called Ken Wilber, and he's got a bunch of books out. He's a writer, philosopher, and one of the concepts in his work, it's called spiral development. And spiral development is really about how human mind, I mean, many ways you can apply that concept, but it's about, let's say you learn something, you learn a particular skill, and then this skill works really well, and you become very automatically, right, as a human being, you become very attached to the skill, and you just keep applying that skill more and more, and you seem to achieve better and better results, and so on, and you keep doing more of that, and so on. However, eventually you will face a situation where that skill will not support you moving forward. In fact, it will become your downfall, so you will not be able to move forward unless and until your brain will eventually find a way to go beyond that and kind of see that the skill was awesome in this context, and now you have finally faced a context where that's not working. So to go from accurate to specific, for example, one of my strong skills has always been discipline. I guess some circumstances in my life when I was a child developed that, and it's been a very powerful tool for me. So I've always been very disciplined. I'm very good at just following things, doing things, the Duolingo app where people learn languages. So my streak on that app is something like 4,200 days, right? So it's
awesome.
11 years or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I'm good at that, right? But here's the thing, when we are, discipline is a powerful skill, and eventually, inevitably, you will find a situation in life where that skill just doesn't apply. When you trying to just keep doing stuff, but you're not being sensitive. And to give you some small examples, kind of looking back with my discipline of doing stuff, maybe sometimes I was not paying enough attention to how I was feeling physically when I was pushing through and really messing up with my body, with my organs, because who cares that I'm sick or whatever? I have to do this. I have to keep doing this, right?
Yeah,
I'm not being sensitive to what other people around me feel and want and stuff like that. Because again, I have my disciplines, and then I kind of focus on them, and then I lose sensitivity to that. So going back to your original question, right? It was a very long-winded answer, right? But it's about analytical skills. As the world has created me, I'm a human being with with strong analytical skills, and it's been very awesome for all kinds of reasons applying that. Eventually, all kinds of, and so for me, it's always been important to self-reflect and think and conceptualize. But here's the thing, like eventually you will inevitably hit the limits of that. Because however smart you are, you're a human being. And the world outside of you is infinitely more complex than your ability to conceptualize that, right? So eventually, the brain can see that, and it can realize that, all of those models and concepts, being analytical about stuff only take you this far, and then it kind of tries to find something else. How can it, if you will, less analytical, but more emotionally intelligent, more sensitive, and so on. And it's a very natural progression. It happens in different ways at different people. Somehow on my journey, that's kind of how it unfolded, from a lot of like conceptualizing and self-reflecting and other stuff. Eventually, the brain shifted into a new way of being. And, the analytical skills are still there, and they can be applied when there is some projects to be executed, some problems to be solved, right? But you probably heard the saying that humans are not problems to be solved, right? And it sounds simple and obvious, but, analytical people quite often just keep doing this stuff. And I can see that so much now in the world, right? You come across all of these brilliant people, and they're absolutely totally blind to their own limitations, to their constraints. They're not connecting with the world outside of their wonderful, but still inevitably limited analytical model of the world, of themselves, of their business, and so on, right? So there's not enough sense and an emotional intelligence and connection to the intuition, if you will.
Yeah,
So
for
that's
sure.
how to think about it.
For those maybe that have either been told or self-identified that they are lacking emotional intelligence or haven't maybe explored that, where does someone start? I mean, and maybe I'll start with this. I'll never forget a super challenging time in my life. I want to say 4 years ago. I had reached out and kind of shared, hey, Dima, this is going on. And you didn't say anything other than, you were supporting me, but you said, I want you to read this book. And I think it was The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. And it was sort of the start of this peeling of some layers back and some material that I hadn't really exposed. And I was like, I think I was looking for an answer from you at that point. You said, I'm not going to provide that. Just read this and then let's have a conversation. And again, there's so many moments where I could go, Dima, shared this or helped highlight this in my life that helped me go through there. So back to the question is, for those that are stuck or have even no awareness that they're lacking emotional intelligence or being able to discover and recognize some of those feelings that are there but holding them back, where does someone start?
I would say that it kind of happens automatically because every human being will inevitably face some situations which are, some crisis, some situations while we're just unable to move forward. And then brain spins up very complex stories. Who is to blame? Oh, it's like, I don't know, Trudeau government is doing this, or Trump is doing this, or whatever, like, Putin doing that in Ukraine.
Or family,
we blame
colleagues.
ourselves, or family. Yeah, exactly, right? But here's the deal. Every situation that we face, when we have a story that this should not be this way, this is really just a gift from the universe for you to recognize something that your story about the world is conflicting with the way the world is. Then the brain automatically tries to argue with that. It's like, no, it should not be this way. But it is this way. And it doesn't mean that it will always be this way and so on. But it really means that your story about how it is conflicting with how it actually is, right? So what I'm saying that each human being will face those crises, again, in relationships and business, whatever. And each one of them is an absolute gift to start recognizing that. Like, what am I not seeing? What am I not feeling? Why, and not necessarily even on the intellectual level, right? But again, it's like, how can we face the situation and then really go toward it, but not in a way that it absolutely has to be changed and resolved. That's like a difficult emotion. Like we talked about this with you, Chris, like a number of times, right? Like, a difficult emotion, quite often, all as a human being, we try to do is we try to find a way to get rid of that, right?
Sure, suppress.
But
like I don't
Yeah,
I don't deserve this. I don't
avoid,
want
suppress,
this. Yeah,
whatever, right? Get rid of it, right? But, or understand it or accept it. But they are all fancy words for, I want to get the fuck rid of this emotion because it's uncomfortable, right?
Yes, I hate this. Make it go away.
Yeah, right. But sometimes we're able to try something else. Like we actually, there is a recognition like, oh, this is the way things are. And, there's finally that surrender. And that surrender cannot be done, cannot be achieved, cannot be learned, taught, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But it can happen. It can happen magically. And that's like the paradoxical nature of surrender, that it happens. It can happen right now, right? And when it happens, then there is a new, broader perspective, comes up, and then we can see this is, like, here's a way I think about this, and it really means that my way of thinking about the world is limited, right? So kind of going back to that question that you asked about emotional intelligence and being analytical about the world and whatnot. Again, it is really about starting to look differently at every situation, every painful, uncomfortable situation where we get stuck. And it has the seed of some absolute new and wonderful learning, whatever that situation is, or whether it's a business crisis, a crisis in your relationship with another human being, or something else.
Yeah, I think it might have been McKernan, but I heard it last week. It was, right next to your deepest pain is your greatest opportunity, or the biggest joy in life.
McKernan. I've heard that from him. Yeah. That's exactly kind of pointer to the same direction.
Yeah, for sure.
And, what does it really mean? As you know, we have both benefited so much from being an EO forum, right? And whatever is that context that you have, right? But having other humans around you who you can vulnerably share this kind of stuff with and share your experiences and support each other, I found that to be extremely valuable because, again, like we all humans and we all kind of try to go from our own experience, and our own experience is a very thin slice of life. And, if we can multiply that by some number, by connecting with other humans going through somewhat similar things, then it gives us immediately so much more leverage to move faster.
Yeah, absolutely. You could tell me, but it was probably 6 years ago, maybe you did a week-long meditation retreat. I remember sort of when you did it, but can you share that experience and how that impacted you? Or maybe start even with your exploration of meditation.
Yeah. As a very brief background, right, I always had a lot of curiosity, and I still have. And there were different phases in my life. As a kid, my curiosity was about exploring math and science and all of that kind of stuff. And that's kind of what eventually got me into being interested in technology and computers and so on. Then later on, a new dimension of that curiosity was discovered when the concept of self-improvement and personal growth was discovered. And then I really pursued that for a while. And then eventually I found a new layer of those kind of things. And let's call it roughly spirituality, and, including things like Buddhism and meditation. So I really went into that and, reading a lot about it as kind of very natural way of exploring things, but then also trying to do that in a practical way. So again, I was practicing meditation for quite a while, quite a bit, like for a number of years. I did it for a couple hours a day. And eventually, I wanted to do what's called a Vipassana. And Vipassana is typically a 10-day retreat, a meditation retreat. And you can do it in many different ways. And I went and we did it in a pretty hardcore way. I write about the particular venue in this book, and went to this traditional old school Buddhist center in Malaysia. So I went there, and that's kind of what we did for 10 days. And the idea of Vipassana is that you totally disconnected and isolated from all of your typical ways of how you destruct yourself and so on. So there's not talking to other people. You don't listen to music. You don't read books. You don't go outside. You don't do anything. All you do is you meditate the whole fucking day. You get up at like,
no phone, obviously.
Yeah, no phone, nothing, no devices, nothing, right? You get up at like 4:30, and then you have a couple of meals, like breakfast at 6, I think, and lunch at 11. And the rest of the day, all that you do is meditation. You do this kind of meditation, that meditation, so on. So it sounds like, what does it do? I would say that one of the big revelations was immediately, well, after a few days, is like, oh, wow, how much stuff is constantly going on with me as a human being that I was not aware of at all. Like, and how their human body is so used to trying to, like, when it feels somewhat uncomfortable. And there are all those things they constantly flow through us. It's just like most of the time we're not paying attention to them. So then, but just like we have a subconscious reaction. Let me maybe have a snack. Let me have this. Oh, let me talk to these people. Let me whatever, right? And when all of those distractions are gone, then inevitably you're just faced with what is there. And it actually was very, very uncomfortable. Like I didn't expect this to be so uncomfortable, to really just like face this unstoppable ongoing flow of sensations, perceptions, emotions.
You were stuck with your thoughts and emotions and everything,
yes,
right?
Yeah, that was that. Like, it was very difficult and very eye-opening to kind of like, recognize how much of that is constantly happening. And yes, I was 45 years old and, I had no idea that all of this stuff was constantly going through me. So it was very eye-opening.
At what point during the 10 days did you feel there was a transformation or what changed for you? Because it sounds like super painful, especially off the start.
It was like, and after a few days, when it really started to pick my mind, is like, Dima, why are you doing this? Like, you're doing this to yourself, right? Just like, leave this stupid place and go somewhere and whatever, right? And then it became easier. Then it became hard again. So it was kind of this yo-yo. So it was like coming and going, right? And when it comes, I'm like, oh, because the mind is always trying to find control. It's like, it became easier. I mastered it. Now this is how it's going to be. It's going just to be chill. So awesome. And then the next day it's back on and it's like uncomfortable. And you're like, whoa, I lost it, right? So that kind of continued. So I would say for all of that, I ended up being there for 11 days. So yeah, and it was like this, like, some relaxing to this and then being very comfortable and relaxing. And again, at least just a new layer of this flow.
Wow, what an experience. And then you maintain meditation as a part of daily practice since then, or how is that
for some time? I stopped 2 years ago. There is no more meditation in my life.
Amazing. I appreciate you sharing. Thank you. Let's jump over to the world of crypto and blockchain, because the last year especially, there's been tons of hype and the increase of Bitcoin but you've been around the space for a long time, and maybe share just how you got in and through Vitalik's lens. But I'd love to hear your perspective also on where it's going, in your opinion, and some of the great things happening.
For sure. Yeah, I got into this again through my curiosity. I was reading a lot and listening to podcasts, and then some people mentioned that, and I kind of got curious about this, researched it a little bit. And then I mentioned it to my son, Vitalik, and then he ended up being very interested in that. And then he ended up inventing Ethereum, which gave birth to so many other things on top of that. And because now, him being my son and creator of Ethereum, then obviously I developed a deep personal interest now, much more than just like, curiosity. So I've kind of been following that space for the last 11 years, I guess, or so. And in the foundation of this, it's actually a very interesting idea, because before the invention of, we humans, we build these complex technological systems. And most of the systems we built before blockchains, they were what's called centralized, meaning that you build a very complex system and, like human structures are centralized, like in the church, in the army, in the government. We're used to that. And technological systems, they were built in the same way. Here you have this powerful servers and it does this kind of stuff, collects all information, blah, blah, blah. All of that is built on a very important assumption that the core of the system, the central part, there is some central part, and then it's maintained by very smart people who will take good care of that. And here's the problem with that eventually there are flaws in centralized systems because we humans are full of flaws, right? So
that's right.
If you have whatever, you have church, and then you end up having priests that abuse kids. You have, army, and then army commanders get corrupt to do all kinds of other stuff. You look into the government, same happens with IT systems, right? So they collect all of this data for whatever purposes they think it's necessary, they need it. and then eventually there are breakdowns. There are no ideal systems, right? There are always flaws, human flaws, technical flaws, whatever, right? And the system get hacked, and get hacked, and then all of this data just gets stolen, all kinds of problems. So blockchains are built on a much better assumption. They're systems built on the assumptions that systems are not ideal. They're not, they're no longer assuming that there are some good humans that will take perfect care of the system, but instead it's like they're assuming that humans will try to game each other, because that's what we do. Like, we have all of our desires and fears, and we kind of try to game each other and get as much stuff for ourselves. And then we have all these wonderful stories how makes so much sense that the good stuff should be with us, and then we'll do good with this versus all those stupid other people. Anyway, so blockchains are designed with the assumptions that people will try to game each other, right? And they're built without a central part of this. So that's kind of why they call that decentralized technology. So instead of like with regular banking system, when you have banks and the central bank and blah, 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 and you have all this complicated system, and then there are people at the top that control it, right? But here's the problem, right? People that control it, they're humans, and then they end up using those things for their own gain, and they print money and whatever. So the idea of blockchains was very decentralized systems that are not controlled in this way by, a group of people, but they're decentralized and, if you will, controlled by everybody. That's on a very high level generic concept.
Yeah,
right?
No, it's great. I appreciate explaining that.
So yeah, that's kind of been, it all started with Bitcoin. How can we create decentralized money that is not controlled by a central entity, by some group of people, but instead of, if you will, is fully democratic, decentralized? And it was a wonderful invention. And then Vitalik had an idea how to improve that and added programming language to that. And that's how Ethereum was born. And then on Ethereum was, the foundation of Bitcoin plus the ideas of Ethereum of having programming language on top of this. Now people can use the same decentralized technologies for gaming, for real estate, for finance, for anything, for identity, and so on. So that's really the big decentralization movement. Here's the thing, right? Because it's decentralized and nobody controls it, so then everybody has their own idea of where it should go and what should happen, right? And then we are human, and we are full of fear, and we are full of greed. So then we kind of want to make lots of money, and we want to gamble, we want to do this, and we want to do that. So there are lots of experimentation in this space and lots of crazy stuff. Just like yesterday, Trump launched his meme coin and, made billions of dollars out of the blue. And, and a lot of people in their blockchain community, they're up in arms, like, oh my God, what they're doing is totally wrong. This is not what it is for. But that's the thing, right? Because the whole idea of decentralization is that there's no single authority that says, this is good, this is bad. But it's more like, here is the platform, and then humans are free to do whatever they do with it, right? And humans follow their desires and fears, and then they experiment, and some people end up making tons of money. Lots of people end up losing lots of money, and so on. And from all of that experimentation, some new ideas, come up, and people try to build better systems, and so on. That's an unstoppable process. So that's kind of my high-level view on the blockchains, if you will. So we have a lot has been achieved, and I think we are actually now entering the era of mass adoption, right? With the president of the biggest country of the world launching his own meme coin and some other stuff happening and so on. So it's exciting and scary times. And like in every big transition, there are tons of opportunities, and also, we humans, again, we get excited, and then we go with the crowd, and then we panic with everybody else, and then again, we make some money or we lose lots of money.
That's right.
And it goes back again to your sensitivity to your own emotions, right?
Yeah. For blockchain looking out in the upcoming years, are there one or two things that you either see or have heard about that you're excited about for mass utility?
I think that some of this is like simple stuff, just like U.S. is the most powerful country in the world, and the U.S. administration for the previous 4 years has been very hostile toward crypto and all of this stuff, and that's been really making it very difficult for people in the US and not just in the US to adopt this stuff. So I think that just by the virtue of the new administration hopefully being friendly toward crypto, there's just like a much wider potential, there's potential for much faster, broader adoption of this. And in that environment, again, there will be lots of experimentation. So people will do all kinds of stuff. And then we will see things like decentralized finance has been in play. But I also think that their interaction between the blockchain industry and AI industry is very natural because, again, AIs, they're learning to become agents of humans and they learn to transact. And then crypto becomes a very natural foundation for them to do those transactions. And that's already happening. Like, things like just a little tiny example. Few weeks ago, right? One AI bot that has a Twitter account and it's doing some stuff, like basically it has a goal of building up audience. And as it was working on the particular task, then it basically realized that it needs an image, but it cannot create an image in itself just because that particular AI doesn't have the capability. So it posted on the social media that I'm looking for this image to be created. And now the AI bot that has that capability replied to that. And they ended up making a transaction. So made a commerce transaction, in crypto. And this bot created an image for this bot to achieve whatever its goal. So that's kind of just one tiny example of where things are going.
That's incredible. What are you most excited about when you think about AI and as the world continues to adopt it?
Wow. We have never seen anything like that. So this is sometimes people talk about AI as being the last inventions that humans make, because we're already rapidly approaching the situation when modern AI systems are as good at intellectual reasoning, as capable as their majority of human population. If we're not there, we will be there very soon. Yeah. And that really means that all of the industries, all of the businesses, all of the economy is in upheaval. Things that we've been taking for granted and some things that kind of developed recently. But, let's say, for example, Google search, huge business, right? And then people are used to going to Google and searching for stuff and whatever. And then being fed up with all of those ads and stupid, SEO optimized bullshit that is in searches. Well, I know that I currently, out of 20 times I search for something, like 19 times I don't go to Google anymore. I go to one of those AI systems like Perplexity, or I ask ChatGPT or Claude or DeepSeek or whatever, and just ask those systems. They give me an answer and they don't give me all of this BS. SEO
sure, you eliminate all that.
So it's just like one tiny example, right? So the whole search industry that's been built, and that's like many billions of dollars, right? Now it's being changed by that. So anyways, like what I'm excited about is that, yeah, like we are humans now getting the most powerful tool that we can imagine to totally reshape everything that we do. And it is already reshaping any industry you can look at, like, for medical industry. Just yesterday I came across this article that AI tools are now so much better than cardiologists looking at your ECG. And they finding some patterns and they're able to identify issues with your cardiovascular system years before cardiologists are able to see this kind of stuff, right? So any industry, any area of human activity that you can think of, those systems are coming in, because essentially what a human being is, it's a pattern recognition system. It's a system that is constantly finding patterns and everything. Like, you look outside and you say, oh, here's a tree. Well, this was a pattern, right? Like, you've never seen a structure like this with those branches and leaves or whatever, but then your brain conceptualizes that into, this is a tree pattern, and I know that, right? So then, and you can manipulate with that. Tree, forest, paper, blah, 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 blah. So now we have developed a tool that is getting better at those kind of patterning of the world than human beings. And this is a radical invention that is exciting and scary and totally unpredictable. So yeah, all of that at the same time.
Yeah, I heard random stat the other day that something like by 2040, half of the current jobs in the world could be replaced, if not more, through AI.
And those stats are bullshit, because how the fuck do you know, right? Yeah. It's some guy, he sat around, crunched some numbers and said like this. But you know what? Maybe it will be 2027. Who knows? all the bets are off. That's like, people don't realize that how much the bets are off. Like, again, looking at some of the AI systems, like OpenAI released in December, some of their stuff. And then there is one of the benchmarks that they tested against. It's called frontier math, a math that is so complex that only professional mathematicians can really solve those kind of tasks that they test the system on. And I was getting a score that is better than most professional mathematicians on that, So just like, again, like, all those little things, you look at them and they're little dots, but they are shaping every industry. So like short term, at the very least, hopefully in your particular business that you're looking at that and you're trying to look at every process that you have in your business and how can you change that or improve that with AI, from customer support to whatever, like financial management or whatever, right? But then beyond that too, right? If your business does a particular thing, how is that particular thing that, you servicing humans and the industry, how that's going to be different in the world where basically outside of humans, now we will have an army of AI systems, AI agents, and then very soon after that, humanoid robots. Like,
that was literally what I was thinking as I go through this. But I mean, the thing that, whether it was blockchain or whether it was AI, I mean, for 2 years now, every time our group gets together, you always say, hey, if you're not doing it, spend more time, get curious, explore. And it's something that I always remember. And I mean, I'm in it similar to you. It's no longer Googling something, it's ChatGPT or other platforms. And I think it's really exciting. And I always encourage people, like, just continue to try and play and get to know it. You don't want to be on the wrong side of someone that didn't explore.
Yeah, because you will be falling behind. And again, it will be very uneven and, and the way industries will be reshaped. But it will be happening very fast, and it's already happening. And I was listening to a podcast a couple of days ago with Mark Benioff of Salesforce, huge tech company.
Yeah.
Right? And they were talking about that for the first time in maybe in the existence, they are not hiring more software engineers this year because just by leveraging AI, they're already achieving productivity gains of 30% a year without any additional people. Again, like, one more data
That's
point,
incredible.
right? So, yeah. So every industry you can look at, every kind of human activity, this is going to shift and change. And, surprisingly, right? Like in the past, all of those awesome jobs, like being a software engineer or manager or project manager or whatever, right? They seem to be really good, high-paying jobs versus like some of the mundane stuff, like being a massage therapist or electrician. But now it's actually the other way around. It's like, those more physical jobs are somewhat more safe than more intellectual jobs in the short term, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Dima, let's talk psychedelics.
Yeah.
Is the world waking up to or adopting some of these tools more so now than they have in the past, say 10, 20 years? And I'll start with saying, in the 50s, there was such incredible work and progress that was done literally by the government and other organizations. And I think we went backwards for decades and decades and are now starting to realize that, in addition to medication and other forms of therapy, these are, one of many tools available for humans.
Yeah, I think that we're going through a huge renaissance of that, and their volume of research into those things have been tremendous in the last decade and a half. Finally, thank God. And you can see just by looking around you that things are different, So we live in Toronto, right? And in Toronto, even though it's still formally legal to buy psychedelics, but there are like dozens of magic mushroom shops, right? And you can go in there and you can buy mushrooms, you can buy DMT and other stuff. And those are very powerful tools, right? So I hope that as humanity we will be able to kind of focus our attention away from our fears. And those tools are powerful and they can be dangerous, no doubt about this, right? But for me, when something is dangerous, it does mean that we should stay away from that. But it means that, okay, let's look for ways to make it safe, because we already know that those things they're most powerful tools humans found for dealing with, if you will, inefficiency for our psychologists. And one way I think about this is that like every complex system is, there's a lot of randomness in the system. So you as a human being, you end up just naturally through your genes and your upbringing, whatever, you develop a lot of patterns of how you interact with the world. And they kind of arise somewhat randomly because like your parents taught you this, and then in school they taught you that, and those things interact, and then your genes, your emotions, and blah, 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 your neurotransmitters. So then you have certain ways of interacting with the world. And they can work fine, but as we discussed in the beginning of this podcast, is that you will inevitably face situations when the ways you interact with the world will no longer be supportive of this new different environment that is changing so fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the brain developed all those things. And, there's this concept, neuroplasticity, that we have a lot of that when we are very young, then the brain is very easy to reshape. And, if you're young and then let's say you're born blind, then your brain repurposes their neurons that are typically used for visual processing, then the brain repurposes that into something else to be done, whatever. But as humans, as we grow, typically we then become more or less rigid, right? And kind of, that from common sense that stuff and this is how you deal with the world. But the world keeps changing and you keep trying to do the same stuff. And eventually there's pain and, you're unable to move forward. So psychedelics are the best tool humanity have found to help you kind of go back to some of that neuroplasticity for a while. And, your brain is then able to readjust itself and some of their suboptimal patterns that it's been stuck with for a while, then it's able to actually develop some new ones that actually are more adaptive to the new situation. When, maybe as a kid, you grew up in a very unsafe environment, right? Like maybe there was violence and aggression and other stuff, and your brain can end up being shaped in a certain way. But now you live in a world that is much safer, much more peaceful, but you're still reacting in the same way because that's just like how your system, that's where it was formed. And, that's 99% of you, right? So you're maladaptive to the current environment, right? So psychedelics are the most powerful tools humanity has found that can help the brain to change that maladaptation to the current situation. And because they are so powerful, it's also very important to approach them with a lot of caution and respect, and hopefully with a lot of information and a lot of support and other stuff. And I think in Canada, we are more progressive than in many other places, and that's very exciting. And but then humans full of curiosity and they self-experiment and they end up with all kinds of challenges as well, right? Because those things are so powerful.
Yeah. For those, and I think I've asked this or we've talked about this before, but I mean, for those that are saying, okay, I'm cautiously interested or I'm looking at doing this, where does someone even start? I mean, there's obviously you can chat GPT it and look at the internet, but I think it's overwhelming for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, self-education is definitely a starting point, right? And there are wonderful books by Michael Pollan, like How to Change Your Mind, and wonderful documentaries and movies, and there are all kinds of. But eventually, then you still face with like, okay, I want to do this. How do I do this? And we still have. There is a huge lack of support network for this, if you will. So I would say ask around and trying to find people. It's still pretty much underground, but there is a wide network of people who actually specialize in this kind of stuff. People who provide professional support, like, seeders, guides, whatever you call them. Some call themselves shamans, who actually are experienced with these tools. And, then you have to really be careful and find a lot of good references and find some of those people and then leverage them to start your own journey in this direction. So that kind of, again, we're humans and we rely on help from other humans, right? And we support each other, we lift each other. That's how it works.
Yeah, it's so true. Dima, you've got 3 children. How did fatherhood change your life, as an entrepreneur and just in the years as your kids continue to grow older?
Those are 3 most powerful areas in human life, as your business, your relationship, your children are those areas where there is potentially they create a lot of growth, a lot of challenges, a lot of conflict, if you will, right? And So yeah, I became a father when I was 21, um, and kind of then seeing my children grow and supporting them through that. That's been a very powerful learning journey, if you will, and also seeing how we constantly project our fears and desires. So we love our children and we want to support them in any way possible, but then we have all these fears and we kind of hope to build safe life for them, right? And that's kind of one for me in parenthood, one of their, and in general in human life, right, is this confusion we have that safe and happy, right? They're two different things. You can try to be very safe, but you can end up being in a very, very small, safe, dark box and being extremely unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way to, as you pursue your desires and all of this stuff, you will inevitably face some very unsafe situations, right? It's kind of like that pursuit of our joy, of our desires, of our love, and all of that stuff inevitably can be very unsafe, right? So for children, right, like, we kind of want to keep them safe, and we kind of try to sometimes to just control everything that they do. Don't do this, do that, and
Overprotect
overprotect them, right? And then then you should do this career, and then you should go there, right? Again, because we want them to be safe and want them to be happy, right? But again, most of the time, human system over biases and fear, right? Because if we see a rope and we take it for the snake, 100 times out of 100 times, let's say 1 time out of 100, it's an actual snake, but we will still think about it as a snake 100 times because it's safer that way. Same with our children, right? Like, we are so scared and we're kind of trying to control everything as much as we can, but you cannot. End of the day, it's like being a parent is constantly facing your fear because you want them to grow and move forward, but then like, oh, let's control what they can do on the internet. Let's do this, let's that. And that's my philosophy has been different. It's more like, okay, I'm scared. I know that they want to do this and I'm scared for them to do this, but how can I support them moving forward with this without me just like constantly trying to control and block and stop this? Because end of the day, they will find a way around this, right? And,
for sure,
how can we find a way to support them and, go online and find some stupid shit, but how can we talk to them, right? And maintain the connection with them that will maintain the dialogue, right? So that we can help them deal with life the way life is. And life is full of greed and violence and craziness and some really messed up people. And you cannot escape that, right? You cannot like find a safe container for them, like, but how can we love our kids and keep them safe enough, but then support their journey into adulthood, which is facing all of this stuff that we will inevitably face.
Yeah, and
so that's
you constantly remind me that, that's the beauty in life is not just the happiness, the joy, it's the pain, the suffering. It's all of those, series of emotions that mix through to make it what it is. And not protecting our kids and not trying to take that away from ourselves or anyone else, I think is so important. And I think that's great advice or sort of an experience you shared there to, give them the tools, but let them experience.
Yeah, because, end of the day, it will be experienced. There's no way around this, right? It's like, you cannot escape that.
Yeah, absolutely. For life, business, any category you want to talk about, what are you most excited about in the next few years as your journey continues?
Well, definitely the evolution of AI that's reshaping their human life. That's very exciting. And I'm looking forward to exploring what it does for humanity, right? From unleashing our creativity. Again, like I've always been a very techie guy and had no exposure to, if you will, never thought of myself as creative. And then in the last couple of years, just like playing with AI tools, I created so many cool images and videos and now music and other stuff. Just like, that really expands my creativity because if I don't have the skills to draw or whatever, but now I can talk to AI tools and I can still use my creativity, my fantasy, my ideas, but then I have a tool that can build it for me, right? So it's actually much more powerful interface for humans to interact with the physical world. It used to be that, to interact with the world, and let's say through computers, right? Computers are powerful tools, and then they have this complex software or something like Adobe Photoshop, and then you have to spend hundreds of hours to master how you do stuff. And now there are tools where you can say, hey, European squirrel, awesome. Now add a gold hat and, give it a sign like Happy New Year, whatever, right? You want to do. That's human creativity, right? And then also things like human health. There are so many exciting things. So yeah, all in all, I would say the evolution of human tools and how they affect all of their industries, human economy, human life, everywhere. That's very exciting. And then additional aspect of that is humanoid robots. Again, that seems a little bit further away, but it's not that far. We're getting there very fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Exciting times. I think I keep saying that people are going to look back centuries, to this moment in time where just there was this mass growth and evolution, and our world's changing faster than ever before us, which is exciting and scary.
Exactly.
Dima, I appreciate you for making the time to come on and again share your wisdom, your experiences. I more appreciate just the ability to have a friendship with you, and I call you my shaman, my mentor, my guide. I've got a bunch of names for you, but I love you from the bottom of my heart, and I really appreciate you taking the time to help out today and share your story.
Thank you, Chris. I love you as my friend, and I really appreciate our conversation. Thank you.
Awesome.